I'm Adam Blattenberg from Diesel World.
Hi, this is Dan, owner of Dan's Diesel Performance.
I'm Christian Roth of BD Diesel.
I'm Braden Fleece, and you're listening to the Diesel Podcast.
What is going on, Diesel Nation? We're excited to have you guys with us today on the Diesel Podcast. One of our favorite things is when we get listeners who message us with their truck builds and really cool things that they've been working on. And our guest today, his name's Cody, and he had reached out to us on Instagram, and he wanted to show us a truck. He had a 12-valve regular cab long bed Cummins, and one of his friends had bought a 2002 Ram, and it was a roller project truck. And after a couple weeks, his friend said, "Hey, do you want this truck? I'm not going to do anything with it." And Cody wanted to jump right in with it, do the 12-valve swap over the transmission, and he did a ton of the work himself. So we're going to ask him about building the engine, the transmission, how he got the gauge cluster to work, and a whole bunch more. Before we get to it, though, we want to give a shout out to a couple of our sponsors that help make the Diesel Podcast and these episodes possible. First is Mishimoto, and we've been chatting about coolers and things as we're rounding out winter, heading into spring, and summer will be here before we know it. I know a lot of you guys are towing with your trucks, using them for work every day, and one of the most important things, especially in regards to the transmission, is keeping those temperatures in check. So if you notice those temperatures creeping up and you don't have a transmission failure, it could just be there's a lot of mileage on the factory cooler, especially if it's an older truck. Make sure and go to Mishimoto.com. You can check out a ton of different options that they have based on whether you got a Ford, a GM, or a Ram truck, or there's even custom options for a standalone cooler or auxiliary ones as well for some of those race trucks that are out there, or just something that's doing a lot of low-speed driving where you may need some extra cooling capacity. And for the shop owners out there, we love hearing from you guys, and we know that we've got a loyal listening base of diesel shop guys all over the country and all over North America, really. And we want to encourage you guys, if you're looking to get Mishimoto radiator coolers or any of the Mishimoto product line, make sure and check out Turn 14 Distribution. They're set up across North America to be able to get you product as quickly as possible. And one of the things that's so important is, you guys are busy. There's tons of trucks showing up, and trying to call a toll-free number, wait on hold can be tough. Well, if you go on their website and you got an account, you can see what's in stock, where it's in stock, how quickly you can get it, the shipping costs, everything like that. So you can keep trucks coming in and out and make sure your customers are getting on the road and, just be right on to the next job. So don't forget to check them out. All right, let's get to the podcast with Cody and talking about this 2002 project truck that he has and the 12-valve swap and all that went into it. Cody, welcome to the Diesel Podcast. I appreciate you reaching out to us on Instagram, sharing your build and telling us about your Cummins, and I always love to chat about these builds and restorations and things that like you did from the ground up, building the truck that you want. I know our listeners are going to enjoy hearing from you, so welcome to the podcast.
I appreciate you having me.
I want to start because when you messaged us, you sent us a picture of two different second gens, and I wanted you to walk us through the history of the two trucks and how this build started and just kind of where it came from.
Well, I had a buddy in high school that he ended up having a 98, and at the time I actually had a 95 extended cab 12-valve. It was an auto, and me and him always ran around together, and we literally beat the snobs out of the trucks. And what ended up happening was any other automatic, my truck went down, and at that time he was wanting to get rid of the 98 for a Duramax. So I ended up selling my 95 for his truck, bought his, and from there it just evolved. It was just a 12-valve with a 5-speed single cab long bed, and I did anything that I could to grab a hold of it. And I ended up getting it, and I had it for, I think, about 8 years, and I did a paint job on it, wheels and tires, a set of injectors, had a stock charger on it, and just over time, the trans, I just kept having trans issues, and went through 4 or 5 trans in it, and just couldn't figure it out over the years, and I just kept fighting it. And here back in, I believe, into 2017, he ended up buying an 02 extended cab long bed no engine or trans, a roller out of South Carolina. And he just, out of the blue, just texted me one night. He had it for about 2 weeks, and he says, I'm not going to do anything with this thing. Do you want it? And I immediately texted back and said, absolutely. So after that, I mean, I went over that night, looked at it, and that was the end of it. And that was just the start of pulling everything out of this 98 and to shove down in that 02. And it was just a blessing in disguise, really. I mean, I couldn't be more happier with the route that I went.
Now, when you got the 02 and you're looking at it, what was your goal when you were going to swap, the engine and transmission, other things over? Was there a particular power number or a use that you were looking to achieve with this new truck?
To be honest, in the beginning, I was more or less the 02. It's very, very clean. I mean, for here in Ohio, it's a very, very clean truck, and it's got its couple little blemishes and whatnot. But my goal was mostly to not only have a beautiful truck on the outside, have a beautiful interior, but also have a really nice engine bay. And I was really just wanting to dress it up, but when I started doing things, it just kind of did a snowball effect. I just started doing chargers and injectors, started getting head work and pump work, and it all just snowballed. And I was really just wanting a daily driver truck that was really nice, and over time I just was like, well, I'll do a daily driver street truck.
The color, when you sent the picture of the truck, the thing that jumped out at me is I'd never seen a color like that. And I wanted to ask you, because it's a factory color that you have, and I mean, I've never seen one, so it definitely caught my attention, seeing the 02 and just the color of it.
Well, they call that the Almond Pearl, and it's a color that I'd never seen before either. The only trucks that I've ever seen that color on was on third gens. And so I kind of poked around a little bit, and I thought that maybe somebody did paint it, but poking around on Facebook on a couple of forums, there was somebody else out there asking if anybody else had this truck color. And literally I can count how many people really commented on there, and there was only about 5 or 6 people that actually had that color. And yeah, it was a factory color, and it's kind of nice to know that it's not just an ordinary color on a second gen.
Yeah, it's a super clean truck, and when I was reading through kind of the background of the truck itself, you did a lot of work on it as far as swapping everything over. And I wanted to start with the engine and ask you about swapping it and building it and how you did that.
Well, when I pulled it out, it was the engine ended up having 260,000 miles on it, so it was a pretty greasy old pig. She when I actually had it in my 98 and I bought the 98, I mean, that thing, it'd leak a gallon a week. And so you just imagine the amount of oil and the amount of dirt and dust and everything that was on it. So a lot of diesel fuel and a couple good brushes, gave it a good wash down. And it just, going through it and everything, all you could do is put a socket on something and things were a little bit rusty, and all you could do is pray that it wasn't going to snap off and you're going to be drilling it out. So going from there, it was actually pretty good and easy. I ended up having one bolt snap off on the manifold, which really wasn't too big of a deal. I ended up drilling it out. And back in the day, I've heard a lot of stories about my old truck, the 98, and that truck was beat to death. And I'm talking, people used to tug with it. That truck would haul ungodly amount of loads that it probably shouldn't have been. And there was at one point where they were either tugging or doing a burnout or something, and they lifted the hood. It actually peeled the paint on the hood, but lifted the hood up, and the backside of the Charger and the manifold were glowing red.
Wow.
So after hearing a lot of those stories, when I pulled it out of that truck to put in this one, when I started tearing it down and I started to pull the head off, I kind of expected at least some scoring on the cylinder walls or maybe a beat up top of the piston or something. And I pulled the head off and there were still hash marks in the cylinder walls. And the top of the pistons, I took a little bit of WD-40 and a rag, and they cleaned up like new. And there was no piston slap at all. I ended up flipping the engine over and plastic gauging it, and everything was still in spec.
Wow. I think it's a testament to how tough those engines are, and I think one of the reasons that so many people love their Cummins engines and buy those trucks for the engine is just how strong they are.
Well, and they usually say, as long as you keep up on your oil changes, things tend to last. Well, I kind of have a tendency to think that thing's pouring out a gallon a week and keeping fresh oil in it. I think that helps out a lot.
Now, had you ever torn down an engine and gone through one before?
I've done a couple tractor engines, a couple small engines, but never got into depth like I'd have done on this one. This one was, I put a Hamilton 182 or Hamilton 188 over 220 cam in it with a Hamilton retainer and the thin air diesel KP fix, mild port and polish on the head, valve springs to heating machine titanium retainers and keepers. Just literally anything and everything except for the bottom end.
When you jumped into the engine build, where did you find either information or guidance or maybe help in doing that if a question did pop up or you weren't sure about something?
Well, just like really anybody in the Cummins world, they run to Greg A pretty much on YouTube, or it was more of just really going onto Google and going to the old Cummins forums and just looking up the old forums. I mean, there was a lot of guys back then that were real informative. And, in today's world, if you go on Facebook and you go on to second page or something and ask a question, you're going to get 30 different mixed results. And none of them are going to be right to anybody. So it's kind of hard to kind of figure out and believe what to do.
Yeah, the old like TDR Cummins forum, and going back to some of like the stickies that they have and some of the things from years ago, they're so detailed and in depth, and there's a lot of great information if you're really looking to jump into something and see how something was built or installed or something like that. It's a tremendous resource.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm talking about so old ones that when you go to click on the images, they don't even pop up anymore. Or if they do pop up, it looks like they were taken with a potato. So
yeah, the picture quality, depending on what year it was, is definitely not what we have now. So when you get this engine built and it's put together, as far as getting to the power number that you wanted, what companies or guidance did you look to there with fuel and air and being able to make sure that you had the power that you were shooting for?
So charger wise, I went through Mac down at MDC Diesel, and that's a Smedding charger, which is I ended up picking out a S4. At first, I picked out an S464. 83 with a 90 AR housing, and when I did get the truck running and I drove it around for a few weeks, I ended up actually overspeeding that charger. So I ended up actually upgrading, talking to him, and I upgraded to a 468 with a billet wheel. And injector-wise, I ended up going through Diesel Auto Power. I talked to them guys. They were real informative on everything. And I ended up going with a set of 5x16 VCO injectors. And they're a little bit smoky down low, but when they're up top, they keep up. And a lot of my parts that I bought, I either went through Pure Diesel Power or XDP. And both of them companies have been more than helpful every time I've called or anything. And also Scheid too. Scheid was very, very helpful. And I mean, it's just, it pays to buy parts from 2 or 3 companies and stick with them, because the more you buy from them, the more informative they're going to be.
We had Garrett from Pure Diesel Power on not too long ago. We're talking about 12 valves, which I know he's got a ton of knowledge on, and it was really cool to be able to ask him, what people are looking to do with their 12 valves. Are they, call them up or swing by? And it was a really cool chat that we had with him. And it's also really neat to see, I think, in the diesel community in general, is it's not just about the new trucks, it's also the older ones and some of the builds that are going on out there with 12 valves, and just kind of a resurgence with them, and new parts and new things that are being done. And that's what really grabbed my attention about your truck is, it's easy to go to a Ram dealership now and buy a brand new truck, and it's going to have all the bells and whistles and all the different electronics and things like that. But you took an engine platform, the 12 valve that you like, found a perfect 2002 to put it in, and then you just tackled the project yourself and jumped into it. I know there's a lot of listeners we have that want to do that, and I wanted to ask you, as far as doing this project, what kind of snags did you run into, or what maybe spots did you get stuck on, and who helped you, get through that to be able to get this truck where it is?
A few of the snags that I had were especially in the gauge cluster, because that, when you go online or do any kind of research on that, there's really no information on how to do that. And I got lucky having the 98 where the PCM was towards the newer trucks and everything, the newer part of the truck and everything was kind of a plug and play. But there were a lot of things that, when you're doing a build that's stretched over a year, you kind of forget how some things go when you start to finally put it back together. And a lot of my issues were making sure that all my grounds were hooked up, making sure all the grounds were hooked up, and kind of just going through and making sure that all the pins were clean. And really just, there really wasn't too much that I had to struggle with. The only one big struggle that I had with was when I got my head work done. Somehow one of those valves didn't catch it, but it had just a little bit of a lisp on it. So I ended up having to pull the head back off, and we ended up, after that, we actually put oversized valves and seats in it. But really, other than that, I kind of bought a lot of the parts that I bought, and a lot of the pre-maintenance things that I did actually made it go really, really smooth.
What about with the transmission? You'd mentioned before when it was in the 98, you had some struggles with it. Did you transfer that over to the 2002?
I did. So after this is the last trans that I've had, and I ended up buying this trans from a place out of Wisconsin, and when I had it in my 98, I started to have issues with it, and I thought that maybe it was just the clutch. So I already had a dual disc South Bend in it, and so I pulled that out, and then I drove all the way up to South Bend and got it replaced. Put the new one in, and it was still doing it. And over time, about I think like 2 or 3 days later, the shifter just started going haywire. It just started rocking around in third really, really hard, and then eventually I just got locked out. And what it ended up being was, when we pulled it all apart, and we didn't find this out until we were putting it all back together, was I actually twisted the end of the main shaft. So luckily we had another main shaft laying around, and I bought all of my trans parts through a company over in Thornville, Ohio, called Enterprise Engine Performance. And really, I mean, they're good guys. If anybody here in Ohio needs MV4500 parts and they need them next day, you order them by noon, you get them noon the next day. And really all it really was is I put all new synchros in it, refreshened up all the bearings, and put a new counter shaft and a main shaft in, and really that's all I've really done to it, and it's been good to go, and it's been holding the horsepower great. For the truck ended up making 654 and 1291 torque, and a lot of people, they get scared because they say that the trains don't really hold up to about 400, and honestly I've had no issues.
It's really cool to hear about that particular part, because I think, looking back, is the engines were always so capable, and there's been some parts for the NV4500s that have been out there, and kind of some fixes and things like that. But it's a question we get, from time to time on Instagram is, hey, I'm looking at the second gen, has an NV4500, I'm shooting for this power range. Is it going to work, or do I need to put a 47RE in it with billet shafts and the upgraded valve body and clutches and stuff? So it's really cool to hear that it's holding up for you, and the power range that you're at and how you use the truck.
Well, I believe what's helped the most is, for one, having a really good clutch, and two is not being scared to break something out and do it yourself. And if you know the specs on everything, and you could really get that trans into spec on the way it really needs to be, and you're not trusting, relying on somebody else, that helped out a lot, because then that it was built right. And then also too is I lowered my truck down, so my drivetrain angles aren't way out of whack either. And I also put a aluminum one-piece drive shaft in too, which is, I believe, helped a lot, because that takes that carrier bearing out. And I mean, I could cruise 90 down the highway, and that thing, it don't shake, it don't shimmy, it's smooth. And that's just the biggest thing, is just having a nice straight drive line, and that's what I believe makes it be able to hold the power.
Now, if looking into the future, do you think or have any plans to change anything on the setup, or are you happy with where it's at right now?
I'm happy with where it's at right now. If there's anything that I would do is maybe bump my timing up just to progress the power into a higher RPM range. And maybe a different set of injectors. I'm not too sure, but until I hear a rod knock or anything, I really don't really plan on doing anything.
Now, as far as using the truck daily, is it something that you ever tow with, or you're driving it around and just using it that way, or you ever hook a trailer to the back of it?
Mostly it's just a daily driver. If there's ever, I have towed with it, and I will say you got to be very, very smart with it. Very, very smart, because it likes to climb up into the EGTs pretty fast. And but it's doable. It's very, very doable. It's all about being smart on your street driving.
And do you think if someone that's listening out there and they want to do a similar build, or they got a truck in the driveway and they've been thinking about doing something to it, how or what process did you go through to make the power goal, like just be decisive with exactly what you want? And the reason I ask is, because a lot of times I'll see that people will get a 12 valve, or really any diesel truck, and they just go for the power right away. But then it's like, oh, I got to tow a trailer, and it doesn't do it the way that I want, or it gets too hot. And then they're changing the setup, and then they're going through a couple sets of injectors and turbos and just different things, and end up spending a lot of money to get ultimately where they want to go. And it sounds like you, just from the start, you nailed exactly what you wanted to do with the truck. So if there's any advice or tips you'd give to somebody out there for making a plan, what would that be?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is you just got to sit down with yourself and just ask yourself, are you going to be towing 50% of the time, or 70% of the time, or 40% of the time? And if you're going to only be towing 20 to 40% of the time, absolutely go out and build a fun truck, but make it to where if you need to, it's easily tunable to be able to pull the trailer if needed. But if you're going to be towing most of the time, it's just a lot of research and trying to figure out what right charger is for you, especially with what elevation you're at. I mean, what kind of air quality do you have? It's all a scientific thing. And I learned a lot watching videos off of Power Driven Diesel, and they explain to the T on how you can pick the right charger for yourself. And it takes a lot of math to do it, but if you're going to be towing a lot, it's not worth having a big charger and a big set of injectors and everything else like that. But if you want a fun street truck, you can go as wild as you want.
Now, in the I know that, you know, like over the last year, and so a lot of events haven't taken place and stuff, and that's such a key part, I think, for the camaraderie that happens at them. And you know, you'd mentioned Shide, and I know that's like one of the biggest events like every year. But when when you've gone to those, or you go to a dyno day, are there people that just like stop and they're like, what year is that truck? What's that color? Oh, there's a 12 valve in it. And does it start up, you know, like a conversation, and you get to kind of trade truck stories with people?
Well, I've always wanted to go out to Shide. I've actually never been out to the Shide Extravaganza, but I've been going to the KOS event here up in West Salem for the past 2 years, and my truck has struck a lot of conversation with people. It's kind of a unique thing. It's a lowered four-wheel drive, and I still have the 24 valve emblems on the side. So when I pop the hood and people look inside of it, they end up thinking that it's a top feed injector truck. So that really sparks a lot of people. And then when they start looking at it, they're just like, oh, that's just a little dinky old 12 valve in there. But it does. I get a lot of looks and a lot of questions wherever I go. And if I ever go to any car meets or anything, I mean, there are people that do come around and look at it. And that's kind of what I built it for. It's just to kind of show it off and you know, just to spark interest in other people and just spark conversations and meet new people and have some friendships with other people.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's you know, what we appreciate you messaging us and telling us a little bit about the truck, and being able to just talk about it is so cool, and I appreciate you doing that and sharing the build with us. And I know you're going to inspire some people out there to you know, jump into their own build and make the truck how they want.
Yeah. All I've got to say is, you know, don't be scared. It's everything's replaceable, and I know money can be a big part of it, but I wasn't making the greatest amount of money around that time when I was building it, and there was a lot of days that I wasn't eating lunch, but in the end, it was worth it. And just learning something along the way, especially, you know, my truck here, I could drive it to Florida and not be scared about it. And the only reason I say that is because I built it myself, and I went down through it, and if I know something went wrong, I know exactly what went wrong, and I know exactly how to fix it.
Well, we appreciate your time today, Cody, and chatting with us, and definitely gonna you know, stay up to date, follow you on Instagram, and check out the truck, and like I said, I appreciate you reaching out to us and sharing this. I love doing these kind of episodes and hearing what Diesel Nation is out there building and the cool projects that they got. So we appreciate you today.
I appreciate you guys.
Don't forget, Diesel fans, make sure and head on over to Mishimoto.com. Check out all the products they got for your Cummins Duramax or Power Stroke. And for the shop owners out there, if you're looking to be able to stock or just need to get a Mishimoto product, you know, into your shop to get a job out the door, check out Turn 14 Distribution. Give them a call. They've got a whole team of account managers that handle diesel trucks, so they're going to be familiar with the brands and the things that you need and be able to let you know how quickly you can get them. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.